Good morning, everybody. So I'm going to speak hopefully briefly and then leave lots of time for questions. But I'm really thrilled to be back at this conference. I did this many years ago now. And as Maria mentioned, I've had a really long relationship with Film Independent, both for this conference, Project Involve, for the film festival. And I'm so proud of the association because the work that they do so helps add diversity of voice to the things we get to see on the screen, which I think is really a noble thing. Well, this year, zombies seem to be a real hot property. World War Z was a monster hit everywhere around the world. The biggest show on television right now is The Walking Dead, and so it's fitting in just these days, just before Halloween, that your keynote speaker is also back from the dead. It was just a couple years ago, Netflix was announced that we were going to split the company in two, and we kind of overnight went from being a media darling to being a media punching bag. Our stock dropped, some of their subscribers quit, and it looked pretty bleak for this company that has been so the champion of independent cinema. But that was kind of the view from the outside. So the view on the inside was that we just kept doing the things that we do. We focused our resources on the streaming business, pulled back some of the resources from the DVD by mail business like we had thought we should, both because we had bet a long time ago that that's where the consumer was heading. And we are a company that is built on giving the consumer what they want, innovating in the consumer's behavior. But here we are, 2 years later. The subs came back. The investors came back, the press came back, and things feel pretty good. In fact, this quarter surpassed 40 million subscribers in 41 countries and streamed 5 billion hours of movies and television shows around the world. So it's a pretty good time. Today, we in fact are watched for more hours than any cable television network. That's a pretty cool development. Ahead of the Disney Channel and Nick and ESPN and all those massive brands, right behind the TV networks, you'll find Netflix. The other thing that we did was we entered, it feels like a long time ago now, but just last February we entered into the original programming world and started launching our own original series. And it was on February 1st of this year that we launched our first show, which was House of Cards. Thank you. So, and also got to make a little TV history this year because House of Cards was the first show to win a Primetime Emmy, having never aired on a network or cable channel, really blazing the path, we think, for all forms of new television. But I stand before you today at a conference that's primarily focused on film, and we're going to talk a bit about TV, because I think TV is where the audience is. It's where the innovation is happening. And it may be where the future of independent production is happening. When we started streaming 8 years ago, it was a pretty exotic proposition for rights holders. It wasn't a physical media business, it wasn't a theatrical business, it wasn't television broadcast, so nobody really quite knew how or what to sell to us. So we bounced around between the home video groups and the television groups, and in this very kind of ill-conceived, odd digital groups that were forming inside the networks and studios trying to figure out how to sell to us. The funny thing was that these digital groups that were trying to do business with Netflix, they didn't have any control of any of the content, so they'd have to go back to the home video group and the TV group and say, can you give us some stuff to sell to Netflix? And of course, the home video group didn't want to do anything that they thought might hurt DVD sales, so they held on to everything. And the television group didn't want to do anything to hurt syndication, so they held on to everything. And it was a really tough way to kind of navigate the business. And I think if we would have treated our DVD business with that kind of protectionist reverence, we probably would have gone the same way that many of those digital sales groups have gone, and just got integrated into something else. So hungry for relevant content, we did what the video stores did in the 80s when they were looking for stuff. They went to the indies. And those were the first movies that ended up on video store shelves before the studios would put their good stuff on tape, were great indie films, blazing the way. And because of our DVD business and our personalization and all the ways that we help make little-known things known, Netflix had already become kind of an indie sweetheart. being able to be the champion of movies that would open quickly and disappear from single screens in New York and LA and make them kind of mainstream hits. We kind of did it all. We struck films with indie distributors to bring films to Netflix streaming, even before we were sure anybody would watch them. Because HBO didn't want foreign language movies and documentaries, we were able to bring great movies like Susan Bier's first movie, Open Hearts, Guillermo del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth, and the Oscar nominee La Vie en Rose to Netflix streaming in windows that were about 10 years before any of the other studio movies were hitting the site. So that was Bob Burney, who was a great innovator for us early on. The same is true of Jeff Sackman at Think Film, who brought us things like Murder Ball in a really early window. And in 2005, Born into Brothels, the only place you could see it after it won the Academy Award was on Netflix. So these were some of the early innovators of Netflix streaming, were some of the great innovators in independent film. We also formed our own label back then, called Red Envelope Entertainment. We acquired and produced documentaries and stand-up comedy specials, worked with Kirby Dick, Zach Galifianakis, Clint Eastwood, Joe Berlinger, really fantastic projects. And the idea was that we wanted to bring movies to streaming as quickly as they were coming to DVD. And we really, having not being able to do that, as an outsider, we decided to kind of wedge ourselves in as an insider. We wound up doing great projects like Super Jaime, a documentary with Doug Benson that is remarkably popular. I think as kids discover pot, they want to see Super Jaime because it continues to live on and on and on. We did Zach Galifianakis' first comedy special, The Purple Onion, Live at the Purple Onion. Jeff Garland directed Jeff Waters in a great performance film, This Filthy World, and even got a couple of Oscar nominees, see, wishful thinking, Emmy nominees for The Music Never Ends, a doc about Tony Bennett, and Outrage, a doc we did with Kirby Dick. Red Envelope Entertainment itself may have been an investment ahead of its time, but it did serve the purpose of forcing innovation in the distribution of filmed entertainment. So for that, we're quite proud, and for the projects that still are around today and still show up on Showtime and on DVD and even on HBO and when I least expect it. I see that Red Envelope Entertainment pop up again. Besides indie film, the other area of great content promise for us was television. And this was an odd one for us because 8 years ago, we would have self-identified ourselves as a movie company. Netflix used to have our executive retreats at Sundance. Film Independent actually hosted our executives for a week of film school. I mean, this is how we were embedded as a film company. So moving into television wasn't something that we did naturally. In fact, television watching on DVD for Netflix was never more than about 15% of watching, pretty small. So what we found there was that, like the movie business, the television window sucked too. The TV show would come out, it'd be exclusive to a network for 4 years, it'd go into syndication and blocked from digital at almost every turn. So digital was barely a thought. We saw it as kind of as an alternative to kind of the old catalog movies and the kind of extremely obscure stuff we were able to license. We were able to, with a handful of networks, do some really innovative things, like pull the syndication window all the way up to the first year. So, but right after a TV series aired on the network, it could come to Netflix, and people could then discover it and catch up on it. And we went all in. We went really broad. Old shows, new shows, kids shows, everything we could get on the TV space. And consumers adopted, and they loved it, and they loved the choice of it, and they loved the ways that they could watch it, and they loved not waiting, and they loved the idea that they missed something that kind of came and went in the culture, and they never had a chance to catch up. And today, television viewing on Netflix is 70% of those 5 billion hours that I told you about. So 70% is now TV. And the reason for that is kind of simple, that this is the golden age of television. Some of the greatest writers and directors and actors from the big screen are happily doing the best work of their lives now on the small screen. Long-form TV gives writers a chance to flesh out super rich characters, very complex narratives, and create worlds that the audience can actually lose themselves in for hours at a time or sometimes days at a time. And at the same time, movies are becoming these kind of cold spectacles that have to be sold around the world in order to recoup these huge marketing and production budgets. So the release cycles of movies is another kind of problem of why TV is becoming so much more prevalent in our culture. The movies, there's been some movement in the indie space around day and date with DVD and day and date with theatrical, but in very small doses. So the big movies that studios spend billions of dollars to sell to us still are released in almost the same way they were years ago. To the theaters first for months and months and months, and then to DVD, and then wait for months and months and months, and then to pay television, where they end up kind of where Netflix can bring them in. And in fact, I think that these antiquated windows for movies are probably driving global piracy more so than any BitTorrent or Pirate Bay or any of these piracy sites that everyone's always screaming about. Give the consumers what they want. When an enormous crowd, in 1957, Harry Cohen, who used to run Columbia Pictures, died, and an enormous crowd turns out for his funeral. I mean, overflowing. And people are like, we're shocked because he was not a very popular guy. And the comedian Red Skelton famously said at this packed funeral, he's just like Harry always said, if you give the audience what they want, they will turn up. So this is, I think, something that we're still trying to learn today, all these years after that funeral, which is give the audience what they want and they will show up. While movies have been as scarce as can be in early windows with things like much touted premium VOD models that were always coming around the corner, it just hasn't really taken off. And at the same time, television has never been more accessible, more plentiful, and of more high quality. So I think that's why you're seeing these kind of shifts. So if you miss a show that you've been hearing all about and dying to see, and you happen to be wanting to go out for dinner instead, you can rest assured that you can catch up with it at Netflix later, or you can buy it on iTunes. There's lots of choices of how not to miss your favorite things. So there is a problem when I mentioned the piracy on movies around the world, but television is also driving a ton of that piracy now. And again, not because people are becoming increasingly dishonest. I don't believe that. I think it's because the internet is this enormous global, unfragmented platform. There's no, in every other form of distribution besides the internet, there's a physical need for distribution to be fragmented. The satellite signal only covers half the earth at the same time, wires have to be run, prints have to be delivered. But on the internet, there's no reason that you can't push play anywhere in the world and watch the same thing and watch whatever you want whenever you want. And everyone's using this kind of as a marketing platform. So even if you're in Norway and you have the fastest internet in the world and you're waiting 2 years to find out how Breaking Bad ended, you're probably going to steal it. So what we're trying to do is jam these windows, not just in the US, and not just on movies, but try to get as close as we can to the US broadcast of these big TV series, which are every bit the event that a big movie is anymore. So, and again, we don't want a whole generation of people being trained to watch in these illegal ways when they're they have the ability, the desire, and the technology to watch content and pay for content legally. So what's happening now in all that migration is that the television divisions of the studios are doing great, having phenomenal growth, and have very little competition from independent producers. This is mostly because there's a perceived huge risk in producing a television show. Because if you get a show, if you put all the money in developing a TV show and you get a pilot on the air and it gets canceled right away, there's no economic model for that. So millions, in fact, about $800 million gets spent a year on pilots that never get seen and development of shows that never get produced. So it's not without risk, but ironically, it's about the same money that's spent on independent film that never gets distributed. So it's a pretty easy trade-off in terms of economics, and there's a lot of change happening that's making TV much more like cinema. So instead of producing $1 million independent film, which feels like, well, if it doesn't work in the theater, we could sell it on VOD, we could sell it on DVD. Maybe you could think about how you would do that for a pilot. How do you find a great project and develop a great script and create a Bible and attach talent to it and bring it out to the networks? Because what's really happening right now is that there's far more buyers who want to buy outside the box than there are sellers who want to sell outside of the box, which creates an enormous opportunity for independent producers. We have our approach of how to get away from this canceled series and pilot risk is to order shows directly to season. So every show on Netflix that we've bought, we've acquired and gave them a full season on-air commitment. This show is going to get made, it's going to get released, and it's going to get watched. So in that way, we've taken the kind of unprecedented step of ordering 26 episodes right from the pitch of House of Cards, which had never been done before. And now the result of that is, both for competitive reasons and for economic reasons, NBC and Fox have both announced this year that they are ordering new shows direct to season instead of doing these pilot and development deals that tend to never make their way to television. So what we ask for is for the producers to take on some of the development themselves in exchange for this trade-off. So get us a good spec script. Get a couple of them. Tell me how this show will play out over the next 3 to 5 years. Ideally, attach some talent to it. So when House of Cards came to Netflix, we had 3 scripts from an Oscar-nominated writer. Not just Oscar-nominated in his life, Oscar-nominated at the time he was giving us the pitch. We had David Fincher, the greatest director of my generation, attached to executive produce the show and direct the pilot. Had Kevin Spacey and Robin Wright, bona fide movie stars, committed to star in the show. It was not like it was a shot in the dark that we bought the show. Now, everything can't be that beautifully packaged. By the way, it was also based on a show that I loved, the original BBC House of Cards. And so they not only had a great idea of what they could do, you could conceptualize where the show could go over many years. So it was really exciting. Character-driven dramas that are increasingly hard to sell to theatrical audiences. And they are, ironically, in the hottest demand on television. Audiences are in love with TV. So I have to tell you, I live not far from here, and I went to pick up some dinner to go at a restaurant, and I had an Orange is the New Black production hat on. And I was just going to run in, get the dinner, and run out. And a woman taps me on the shoulder, and she says, "Excuse me, do you have something to do with that show?" I go, "Yeah, something." And she goes, "Well, I want to tell you, it's really amazing, and I really love it, and all my friends watch it, and it's so authentic." And she said authentic like 4 times. So I finally jokingly said to her, "How do you know it's authentic?" And she goes, "Oh, I was in prison for 20 months. And she tells me in graphic detail what happened in prison for 20 months, this total stranger. So I realized, though, she's not the first one. There was 2 or 3 other times that has happened to me. I went home and told my wife, we have to move to a better neighborhood. So the lesson in all this, I believe, is that you want to let's give the audience what they want. Unable to kind of change the model much from the outside in the independent world, which led us to invest in things like Red Envelope Entertainment, we're doing the same thing on the TV series side. We would never be able to launch all 13 episodes of a show the same night or launch it in 41 countries of a series that we bought from somebody else. So we had to build it ourselves. And it's all in the effort to give the audience what they want. This year, as I mentioned, Netflix was awarded 4 Emmy Awards, 3 for House of Cards, and 1 technical Emmy for the advancement of the excellence of television. Now, that was a monumental thing that night because everyone always thinks about Netflix as part of this digital revolution or this new internet-delivered television. It's all of this complexity and exotic, descriptions about what we're doing. What we're doing is television. I thought it 8 years ago when we started streaming, and I couldn't hire a television executive because they would all tell me all the things that we couldn't do in the world of television. So we just built it internally and said, let's just get some of the smartest, hardest working people who don't know at all what we can't do. And let's keep trying to do this, because I was convinced that what we were doing was flashing pictures on a screen. That's television, and eventually that everyone would catch up to it. So winning the Emmy Award, which is an award that's designed to award excellence in television, couldn't be a clearer signal that that's all we're doing is television. It's a new kind of television. It's an evolved television. It's less ad-supported. It's got more choice. It works more like you want it to work, but it's still television. Perhaps soon we'll do the same for movies. What we're trying to do for TV the model should extend pretty nicely to movies, meaning that why not premiere movies on Netflix the same day they're opening in theaters, and not little movies. There's a lot of people and a lot of ways to do that, but why not big movies? Why not follow what the consumers desire to watch things when they want? Especially that instead of spending millions, tens of millions of dollars to advertise to people who may not even live near a theater, and then make them wait for 4 or 5 months before they can ever see it. They'll probably get to forget. If you think that they're not going to forget, think about this last summer. More movies with a production budget of over $75 million released than ever in the history of movies. 50% more big box office movies released in the same 3 months of 2013 than the average. And the result of that was a 6% lift in attendance. So the studios have never done less with more than this past summer. Now we expect consumers to remember all those things in their head when they come out later, when they can finally see them. So I don't blame the studios for what they're doing, and I don't fault them, because the studios are always trying to innovate. The premium VOD model that has been tried, and theater owners stifle this kind of innovation at every turn. So I'm concerned, and the reason why we may enter this space and try to release some big movies ourselves this way is because I'm concerned that as theater owners try to strangle innovation in distribution, not only are they going to kill theaters, they might kill movies. So what I would like to do is say, like we've done for TV, let's give the consumer what they want and see if they turn out. And let's not wait till my funeral to see for Red Skelton to make that joke again. So with that, I would like to just mention the cast, the crews, the writers and the directors of House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, Arrested Development, Derek, Lilyhammer, Hemlock Grove. These are the folks I'm talking about when I say the biggest talents from the big screen happily doing the best work of their lives on the small screen. And I want to acknowledge the work that they do, thank them for the work that they do, and thank them that they do it for our 40 million subscribers. Because they're the reason why The Shine is back on Netflix, and probably why you woke up early this morning to come hear me talk. So thank you very much. And with that, I've got lots of time to Q&A. And I should mention, by the way, when we talk about innovating, we talk a lot about distribution and how we do it, releasing all the episodes at once. But creatively, there's something happening too. You know, Arrested Development, any fans? So when we brought back Arrested Development, it has 15 episodes, not 13 or 26. And every single episode has a different running time. So some of them are, the typical running time of a half-hour sitcom is about 22 minutes without commercials. The shortest one, I think, is 28, 30 minutes, and the longest one is 48 minutes. And this was one of these things where Mitch Hurwitz, the creator, came to me and said, I'm dying to cut this down, but we're going to get there. And I said, no, please don't cut it down. Please don't cut it down. Let's keep it going. And the audiences loved it, and also kind of not just broke the form of how many minutes the show would have to be, but also in the form of the 15 episodes. So the first couple of episodes almost didn't make sense until you saw the last few. Could you imagine a network doing that? So, so this is, again, when I think about innovating, it's not just in distribution, it's even in the physical crafting of the episodes, and certainly in the writing. So, anyway, I was just filling time while waiting for hands to come up.
Hi, my name's Brian. I'm a filmmaker.
Hello, Brian.
Happy to have you here. Love Netflix streaming. It's been the key thing that I keep coming back to. I try the shiny disc, I'll try cable. I just get sick of it. I always end up back at the Netflix with the red screen.
Thank you.
But there's an issue. There's something that I have to talk about. My wife is into meditation, things like that. She goes off for a silent meditation retreat for a week, leaves me alone in the house. Do I get anything done? No. I'm power binging Breaking Bad for like 5 seasons. So
nice.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about that sort of new model or new way that people are watching TV 3, 4 episodes at a time.
It's the beauty of being a producer,
maybe
by the way. You
more.
can tell your wife it's research. You're working. Yeah.
Exactly. And is there a term for that? Is there like a new term for this sort of watching shows all at once?
Well, binging is the word that caught on. We tried to stop it. We really did. Because it seems like not a great marketing word. Binge just doesn't. People don't feel good about after binging things usually. Usually binge and purge. So we were trying to avoid that word, but it just caught fire. So we stopped fighting it. But it's interesting. House of Cards is the first show that was actually built to be binged. Every other show on Netflix prior to House of Cards had aired on television before. So it had built into it, act breaks for commercials and kind of artificial cliffhangers that were built in for that to make sure you didn't change the channel during the commercial. The end of the episode, the really kind of hyper cliffhanger to make sure you'd come back next week. So when we sat down with Bo Willem, the writer, and David to talk about the show, I said, look, don't worry about any of that stuff. Think about it like a 13-hour movie. And in fact, if you watch the second episode of House of Cards, it's like the anti-cliffhanger at the end. He's just at a rowing machine, and the audience just is with him, and they can't wait to see what comes next, but not because we manipulated or tricked them in some way, because it's the character depth. And if you take out the act breaks and the cliffhangers and all the exposition, when you watch television, there's an assumption that most of you didn't watch last week's episode. So the writers have to constantly kind of remind you what happened last week. So when you watch them back to back on Netflix, you can see them built in that way. We stripped it all out, and that gives you probably 18 to 20 minutes more per episode of House of Cards to add a new character or to tell some other complex story or some other way to hook people. And it's done that way versus the kind of artificial, oh my God, what's gonna happen? Because people see through it over time, and it's a fun way to watch things, but it's not the way you want to watch everything. So our shows are actually built to be watched in these long sittings, and people seem to love it. So.
I jokingly tease you about it, but I love it.
Thank you. Oh,
You could go. It's fine.
from the diaphragm, please. Well, we are right now shooting the last week of the production on season 2. I can tell you I've seen some of the episodes are fantastic. And our intent is that the show keeps going for sure. It was a 26 episode commitment. It was not our intent that it would just run for 2 seasons.
My second question is, you talked about something very interesting towards the end of your speech, where you talked about your concern about the theater owners stymieing innovation and killing movies. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because it seems to be going to an interesting place that obviously one can work.
Look, I think that there is in every new wave of technology, and it's funny for me to stand here and talk about Netflix as a new technology now. I mean, we've been doing this for a really long time. But I would tell you that in every new delivery technology, there is a war. That thing that is coming along that's gonna kill the old thing. The keeper of the old thing digs in and holds on to it. Of course they would. Now, we've seen it internally at Netflix in a way of saying, look, we built this great DVD service and people love it. But we don't think this is gonna be the thing. When we first came up with Netflix, we called it Netflix because we thought when I met Reed in 1999, he told me his vision for the future was that all filmed entertainment would be delivered to homes on the internet. Not partial, not all filmed entertainment would be delivered to homes on the internet. And that's why the DVD for us was just a bridge technology to deliver bits through the mail instead of streaming them, because it was faster and cheaper to put them on a disc and mail them back then. And then eventually, with the advancements in technology, it became much cheaper to stream. And even back then in '99, we didn't even think about streaming. We were talking about downloading. And to me, I was thinking, wow, this is, remember, 1999. So I'm thinking, wow, he's talking about downloading everything. It takes me about a week to download a clip that somebody sends me now, so this is not going to be a great business, is it? But again, as technology moves forward and you listen to the consumers and you kind of get ahead of what they want, and then don't stand, but once you know what they want, you're crazy to stand in their way. And I would tell you that a lot of studio heads have told me, if we put, back in the day, they'd say, look, if we put movies on DVD the same day they were in theaters, theaters would be empty. So observation is, first of all, I don't believe that's true at all. I think about things like Life of Pi, a really fantastic IMAX 3D experience to see Life of Pi in a theater. Far more people saw it in 2D at home, and will over time. The percentage of people who saw Life of Pi only in the theaters, only in 3D, only in IMAX will be really small. But it was a fantastic experience that got people out of the home. And I think that theaters, I think that theaters will not be empty if people had other choices, because people want to go out. Just give them a great experience, and they will. So I think that, by trying to kind of corral them and force them into it by windowing, windowing used to work beautifully when there was no technology. You could skim the market all day long and then hold things back. Disney, remember, would release movies, then take them off the market for 7 years, and you could only see them, in the theater 7 years later. How do you think that's working today? So my fear is that theater owners rally together to keep the window for movies really long. It's like, even though it's advancing, 90 days is a long time to say, look, if you put this movie out in any other form any shorter than 90 days, we won't run your movies. We won't hang your posters. We'll burn your popcorn. We'll do all those things. So I just think that that's the wrong approach. The right approach is listen to the consumer, give the consumer what they want, and they will turn out. They'll turn out to your theaters. They'll turn out to your VOD channel. They'll turn out to buy your disc. And it's proven true every single time. Every new technology that was going to kill the movie business has grown the movie business.
So I have a question for you about the give the people what they want and the economic model of Netflix.
Sure.
So I produced a film.
Am I seeing? I can't see you.
I'm back here.
Okay.
I produced a film called
I see.
The Queen of Versailles. It's a documentary film.
I loved it. I loved it. Give that man some applause.
And it would have been great if we had been able to simultaneously give it to everyone. But what we chose to do, because of the way we patched the financing together, was to sell off different parts and so on and so forth. But one of the deals we did with Magnolia Pictures, and through Magnolia, they sold it to Netflix. And at the time, I thought it was going to be, an extra bit of money. But what I didn't realize was that Netflix was going to be one of the main ways that everyone pretty much got to see the film. And that had a fairly devastating impact on my ability to make money from the film in a lot of other areas, because Netflix just pays a television model. They pay a single amount, and then it's, hey, we may have a lot of audience, we may not have a lot of audience. So from your point of view, you're just paying a license fee. But from my point of view, it hit our VODs, it hit our DVDs, it had an impact in other areas. So I do understand why movie companies might be worried about that kind of a model. So my question, I guess, is, do you actually build in an upside if a film does very well in terms of people watching it, or do you just pay the license fee, and is that going to change?
We pay a license fee. The way that our business, like I said, we're just television. We license the content for a window of time. And what's interesting is that your observation is, it's not by accident that most people saw the movie on Netflix, because the system is built for it. It's to take a movie that no one ever heard of, with confidence recommend it to an audience, and forge a kind of discovery that would have never happened otherwise. So I would take exception to the notion that because they watched it on Netflix, they would have bought it on VOD or DVD if it wasn't there. That money would have been gone. Our money would have been gone, and your money wouldn't have been materialized in another form. It is and was and continues to be the best economic model to distribute documentary films, because that's where the audience is, and that's where the movies get seen. You could hold them out. I've watched a lot of them. There's a lot of sales agents here will tell you stories too, that they go through the normal channels, reduces the viability of it on Netflix, lowers the license fee from us, and is never made up in movie ticket sales or VOD sales or DVD sales. It's not where the documentary audience is.
If I could just do a follow-up. If I hadn't if I hadn't had other avenues through which to sell, meaning directly to VOD and international, and sometimes the theatrical and so on, I would not have been able to, just on Netflix alone, been able to make the film profitable. So
Well, remember though, you're talking about a fantasy model. So you're saying that if I didn't, you did all those things simultaneously. It wasn't just on Netflix. It was on VOD, it was on DVD, it was available through all those other channels. So I couldn't give you the offset economics of a Netflix premiere documentary that it was only on Netflix, which we'll be doing a lot of the next.
I'm not contesting my particular situation because you know.
No, I'm saying it for all
But I-
situations. If you
but
put
I
it out
am-
everywhere,
but I
then you're
am-
betting on everyone performing.
But I'm just raising the point, I'm raising the issue about, you mentioned give the audience what they want.
Yeah.
But if you're a movie studio and you put it out on Netflix and you just get a license fee and it's blown all around the world, you may actually reduce your upside because you're just getting a one-time fee. So that's why I'm asking if you're planning to pay a license fee with maybe a bump based on performance.
Probably not. Like I say, our business model is built on the television licensing model, and there's no downside if there's a lousy performance either. I don't think anyone's suggesting that, because that happens sometimes too. I think probably the risk of independent film, particularly in documentary, is they're trying to do a mini version of the movie business. And that's not, and they really shouldn't. The documentary business is radically different than the feature film business. In the feature film business, where everything is a swing for the fences, and at the end of look back to the history of the studios. In any 10 years, the movie business is a single-digit return business. Lots of flops, couple of hits. So if you're in that business model, you don't know if you got the flop or the hit until you look back in the history books. So what if the business worked a little bit differently? And when we produce a show, and why I'm thinking about it for movies, instead of saying, look, we'll pay some small percentage of your budget and then see where it happens, what if we said, no, we'll pay a multiple of your budget? And then that is the profit business. Then that is the profit center for producing content. I mean, would it be better to have a smaller but guaranteed return on investment like every other business? Or are we going to continue to follow down the path of the kind of big event movies that might be Iron Man 3 or might be Lone Ranger with very different results? But at the end of the day, single-digit returns across the board.
Good morning, Ted.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming out. My name is Nick, founder at Film Zoo, and I had a question about how Netflix hedges its bets in, you said that 800 million is lost on flop pilots and whatnot. Like, how does Netflix use big data and analytics from maybe piracy as well to ensure that they are not part of that statistic?
So what we do best, we don't use the data that we have. I remember when I say about data, we have the viewing data of everything, what device it's watched on, for how many minutes, how many episodes, on and on and on. And what we're able to do is take the data, viewing and ratings, and more accurately than anybody, I think, identify the potential audience for a project. So you take in all the elements. How many Kevin Spacey fans are on Netflix? And we do that by saying, let's look at all of Kevin Spacey's films, and just show me the people who've watched 5 Kevin Spacey movies and rated them all highly. And by the way, his good stuff and his bad stuff. And The Big Kahuna, by the way, is the bad stuff. And then the other one is like, what else? But if you like The Big Kahuna, you liked all these other great movies that he did, you probably are pretty dependably a Kevin Spacey fan who turns out for Kevin. David Fincher, the same. If you like Benjamin Button, Fight Club, and Seven, these are radically different movies. And if you loved all 3 of them, you're probably, even if you don't know it, you're a David Fincher fan. How many people have watched and rated highly the original BBC House of Cards? How many people have watched and rated highly political thrillers? And all of a sudden what you find out is, while most of the industry in television would have said, DC dramas don't work very well. There hasn't been one since West Wing. So that if people just don't go forward. And what the data said no, this show will work. Because it's not really a DC drama. This is a Shakespearean, story that happens to be set in DC, but it could be also set in the world of plumbing in Cincinnati and be just as good. So basically, it was the big data that confirms that there's a big audience potential for a specific project. And that's how we then back into a license fee and a risk assessment that said, no, this is a pretty safe bet, and let's go all in. In this case, was a 2-year commitment with that team. Yep. You got to talk really loud if you don't have the mic.
Okay, this will be the last question. You talked about the transition and kind of how you started in support of independent film and then what's going on now. I'm interested about the future for independent film. I had a film that did well in festivals called Sarandos, and it had Tony Hale in it, and I sort of all my hopes.
I love Tony Hale.
Yeah, me too. And so all my sort of hopes and dreams were headed towards Netflix, and it was sort of the thing I was most excited about. And it came right in that season that things were transitioning. It was literally said, we're doing House of Cards, and we're not sort of buying as many, we're not as interested right now in this season. So is there truth to that, that's sort of what was happening in that time, that it sort of, I just sort of came in at a season where there was less independent film being, taken into Netflix? And then what's the future of that? Because you mentioned kind of the idea that as independent film comes, is you have this sort of new model.
There's no explicit trade-off between this and that. The House of Cards was, most of our original series trade-off is mostly on other TV, old seasons of television, in favor of exclusive and original TV series. So there was no explicit trade-off not to do that project, or meaning that we were doing this and no longer doing independent cinema. We still continue to invest heavily in independent films and documentaries, foreign language films, all those things that are typically really underserved and why people love Netflix. So it was not a explicit trade-off. It could have been a specific relationship or something, I'm not sure.
Okay. And then once that's done in terms of when the distributor kind of first presents?
The one thing that we find as we kind of scale up that's really difficult to do is the one-off film deal. So it's really helpful, if you can, to align yourself with one of the 250 companies who sell to us already, or with
Film Buff.
Pardon?
Film Buff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or even a sales agent, who has a good relationship with us. I saw Josh Braun out here, but that so that they know our sensibilities, they know our systems, they can work through a deal really fast. I will tell you, and this is self-serving advice. I'll admit it. But a lot of the problem with trying to mainstream the business model for independent is that they're way more complicated to get the deals closed than with major films. The intensity, and it's mostly about lack of resources and everything else. But what happens is at the end of the day, there should be if you have a sub-$1 million independent film, and we have a set of rights, and those two things are constant all the time, that there's a likely, when those are a studio deal, and that movie does $50 million in the box office, I know exactly what that movie's going to cost. I know exactly how many months I have it for. I know exactly what key elements I'm going to have. And with an independent film, every one of them is a dartboard throw. Everyone has there's emotional connections for sure, but there's also, I know that there's financial complexities because of the way that you raise funds too. So it's not like we get big and you don't want to do independent film anymore. We get big and it's hard, and with that you have the ability to do things on the fly, gets tougher. So like the one-off film deals, we used to do a lot of them, kind of lose out in favor of the efficiency of doing kind of larger aggregated deals with distributors.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
Please help me thank him.
Thank you.